Hello and welcome back to awtoolbox.com. My name is Glenn Keller, and in this video we are going to be talking about the last of the tiles that we want to talk about in this administrative overview for Active Workspace, and that is Preferences Manager, but we're also going to emphasize on a little bit more into the installation side of these tools. So as you can see on the Active Admin page I have in the background, the Preferences Manager tile does not exist. So there is a couple of ways you can confirm that it's not there. One of them is searching for tiles. So you can go search for that tile and see if it exists. So I highly recommend this before going down the lines of installing it. If I go into Author, there is a tile that gets added by the Preference Manager server extensions. And I want to do an advanced search as I'm searching for administrative components. I'm going to choose my general search type, which is right here, and I'm going to clear everything out of the search. I'm then going to go to type and type tile, and you'll see there's a bunch of different options. I want just tile. I'm going to do a search here. There's not that many in the system. There may be a lot in a production system of people's tiles that they've created. But notice that in here, if I just do a quick scan, preferences is not, or it is actually listed as one of the tiles here. So I can see the preferences tile in the display, and I can see this is on the eBOM workspace tile collection. So it could be as simple as my stuff is installed already, and it's just not lined up. So let's take a look. I see it here, so something's installed, and we can see if we can get that to display. If you are an administrator and not an infrastructure architect, this next segment is going to be more tuned to the installation side to allow you to understand how the components are built. But in Deployment Center, if I open Deployment Center, this is our installation tool. I can come into DC Admin, which is my credentials in this build. Go into my environment in here. Select the environment that controls the configurations that I have, which is the installation of it. Go into Components, and then in the Components and Applications are where you're really going to see this. Components probably on this one isn't going to have anything for preferences because preferences are really a subset of the set of templates that we're installing. So if I go to Applications though, Applications is going to list out those features. So if I scroll down in here, Preferences is what I want to look for, and you'll notice that even though I had the Preferences tile, Preferences is not in this list. And if you have a lot, do a control find in the browser and type pref, and you'll see I get 0 responses up in the corner. So at this point, I know that I am missing. I may have a tile, but it didn't come in with that. So I'm going to choose Edit right here in the middle of the page. And then when I choose Edit, it's going to open up a whole bunch of things. Now in here, you can tell that some of the elements are installed. And I'll take you through those elements here in a sec. So the elements that we're looking at is the visualization component that we saw in the display is installed with the 3D Viz components. The 2D viewer is a part of that as well. If you come down a little bit further, we had a workflow element that was installed as well. That gave us our workflow components. If we wanted to do PLM XML importing and exporting, we have that here. If we go down a little bit more and you want to do reporting, you have that there. Visualization extension is what gave us the Viz tile specifically, but that's a prereq to the other components. And then notice in this display over to the right, if I do a control find for query, Query Builder just comes in with the tool. There's no responses. Nothing. And then if I do preferences, Preference Management is not checked. So I need to pick that. So if I say update selected objects or applications, Preference Management will get added over to the left-hand side. So Query Builder comes in with the build. Preference Management, you need to select. Workflows comes in with the workflows, viz comes in with the viz, table configuration's already going to be there, indexer configuration will be there if you have the indexer tool installed, which we do, and so on and so forth. So that's what you're looking for, and there is an awesome server extensions guide in the Siemens documentation that'll show you exactly what you need for what component and what they refer to. In here, though, once you add that component and confirm that it is installed, you can see it says pending installation here. Then you can go to your components and build out your deploy package to then deploy this out to the system. Now, if you're going to do that, just note that you need to have approval and make sure that you own the system to do so. But at this point, you check and see if everything's 100%, go to deploy, and then you can deploy that feature out. So just pay attention to what you're deploying to, the environment, and whether or not there's a process in place at your sys site to get approvals for those deployments prior to actually updating the site. So we are going to wait for this to build out. And what it does is it builds a package out in my operating system. It's going to throw it in this apps directory, Siemens Deployment Center repository. There's a set of DC scripts, and if I come in, you can see this script is right here. It's got some instructions. Feel free to take a look at our deployment center guide for this, but if I say extract to all, extract this, I can deploy this out to the system. So in here, it's got basically everything I would need. So as long as I know where my install media is, I can take this, open it up in a command prompt. So I'll say command prompt, run as administrator, cd to that directory, and then we'll do deploy.bat-h just for giggles to see what we get back. And then you can see there's some examples down below of how to run this. So it'll give you a lot of information. But essentially this is used to deploy. And what we need is the deploy.bat-dc username equals, and mine was DC admin, DC password equals, mine was DC admin. And then I need the software location, which is my media. So in my case, the media is in my Siemens Teamcenter 2412. It's actually under apps, media, Siemens, and then in here is software. So this is my media, my template, as well as my 2412. I'll copy that, and it will know which ones to pick up based on my build, and I'm already in the deployer script. So if I run that, I do need to make sure certain things are down. So before you deploy to Deployment Center, typically you're going to at minimum shut off this server manager component. Notice at this point it is shut down, and that is because I am running server manager via a console window. So I'm just going to shut it down this way, Control C. I do also like to get rid of any services that aren't going to play a major function, as this is going to update files in that directory. And if any of these things are running, dispatcher module, scheduler, client, they could impact its ability to update the files. I want to specifically leave the FSC running and the process manager running, but I am going to go ahead and stop my search. So this is the thing picking up indexes, new objects to my global search. And now I have almost everything down. I'm going to shut down my assistant suggestion builder, and then the Teamcenter Vol. I'll just leave that running. Stop the viz components. And I need to leave my dispatcher up. There is a solar component that's still running called the Active Workspace Indexing Service. However, that component's running from, well, it is running from the service, so we'll go ahead and stop it. And now I only have the process manager and FSC. So then I'm going to go ahead and run, and as long as I don't have a typo, which happens, it actually has happened on this case, then it should run through. So in this case, software has a double W. I have a habit of doing that. So we'll just update this, hit enter again, and then as long as it checks out all of the prereqs for it, you'll see it's going through and actually performing that deployment now. So once this gets done, that feature should be in play, and when I turn on the services, we can check out the preferences manager component in the system. For now, let's go ahead and pause for a moment, and we'll come back once this deployment is done. Usually takes somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. All right, now we're back from our deployment. You can see that this has deployed successfully. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to go ahead and get out of my deployment center, though I could select components and just validate that everything was installed correctly and see the status on everything. I could also go to applications and just see if it was still pending install on the preferences manager side. And if I scroll down here, you can see it is actually installed. Now, there's a variety of different places you can check and validate in the operating system, but as an admin, the easiest way is to simply just log in and see if you have access to it. So these tabs were open when I did the deploy, so they need to refresh. When I select them, they should automatically pick up on a new session. In here, I didn't have to restart my services after the deploy with Deployment Center. It has started the indexing service for me. And then if I come through, it started a lot of my other services, though it didn't start my dispatcher stuff. It did start my server manager. I still need to start a couple of things here, like my suggestion builder and what have you. However, if I come in and as the admin user in the DBA account, switch over to the active admin location or workspace, we can now see that if everything worked okay, I should have a new tile here called Preferences. So you may have had this to begin with in your build, but preferences are essential to Teamcenter. You have to have this here if you're going to be an administrator to gain easy access to them. Basically, these are a bunch of settings in the system, and depending on the attribute or value of the setting, you can override things, change things, and how they work. So one simple one that we can show in here is essentially this is the full list, and this is the only place you'll get a full list of all the preferences that are installed for your site. Now, you won't install every single feature in the list like is available in Teamcenter. You'll have a subset of features. So because of that, you will have a subset of those preferences. If I come in here and I do a search for advanced, I can see there is a preference in here that toggles the advanced search visibility. So the advanced search visibility we learned a little bit about. This is available in the search tool. It gives you access to query builder queries, and those are more elaborate queries. So we may only want this advanced tool to be available to DBAs. And that's kind of the use case behind this preference. Right now, for the whole site, which you can see here, the scope, this is available as true. So you'll see it no matter who you are. However, you can set iterations of this preference where this preference says for everybody in the whole system, you get this button. And then I could come in and say, except for on the engineering group. So I could come in here after selecting that, pick engineering, and say, let's create a override for this. So I'm going to say, notice it doesn't have override. It doesn't have it here either. So you just have to pick the right combination. So now that I have the group selected, I'm going to come back and pick the preference. And I still can't see it here. So the goal is to be able to edit it so that we can get that new overridden preference. I could also do it to a specific role within that group or a specific user. So if I come in, I clear this, in the filters when you're searching for them, you can filter down by a product area, what used to be called a category, or whether or not it's controlled via the site or the system as a whole. So I'm going to come back up here, I'm going to search, and what I'm going to do is apply an overlay for that group. So I'm going to simply come down, select the engineering group, which I am a part of, find that preference, and then in here on the preference, notice there's a location and a scope. So if I edit this preference, the scope or location, the scope here, defines what overrides I can set. So I want it to be available to be a group override. I'm going to save that, and now with the group selected and this selected, I should be able to come in and choose new override. So I need to make sure that the scope is set to what I want to override for, and then for that group, I'm going to say false. So I'm going to choose add, and it'll add it in. So now I have two. I have the one up at the top here. That's a group override. It's a site preference. And I can see for the engineering group, we have false. Now, new users or users logging in will pick up on this, but anybody that's logged in when I make the change will have to log out and log in to pick up that change. If I wanted to test this, I could easily come in and say author. And then I am currently the DBA group and role, so I should be picking up on the site-wide preference, and I should see that advanced search button. If I change my group to engineering, it should apply that preference when it loads up the page, and you'll see the advanced search is no longer available. Preferences control everything from how you look at objects, default revision rules in the system, how objects display in the list view. They control how the system stores versions of data sets and much, much more. There are thousands of preferences in the system, each grouped by the features in which they affect, and I highly recommend exploring that preferences component a lot more in depth as we get into some of the preference overviews. Until the 2412 course for preferences comes out, we highly recommend looking over preferences in some of our older courses for Active Workspace, specifically the version of the 6 platform or the 5 platform. They will show you pretty much everything that you can do with preferences until we can get out a more deep dive overview of them. But with this said, we have went over a bunch of the administrative capabilities within the system. There are more things like projects here on the main page and much, much more that you can dive into, but those are the primary ones. We hope that you've learned a little bit about not only the ability to interact with those and what they give you, but also how they tie into the other type of administrative role, the BMIDE administrator, as well as some simple tips on what you're expecting to see and what you may need to know to get those installed. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you learned something from the overview. And in the next video, we are going to dive finally into that BMIDE side to really understand the scope of what that type of administration provides.